Hello, thank you so much to the organizers for having me, Dr. Cookson. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been to Hong Kong twice before, but it's been 6 years, so it's a pleasure to be back and see the exciting developments that are happening, particularly coming from a city like Prague, which is having some development issues, which I'll talk about. Of course, I had some technology problems, so the PC won't play my Mac videos, so I think we're going to load a video remotely. So what that says is, imagine the city is beautiful from every angle. And our mission at Resite is to connect people to their city and allow people to think that they have a place in creating the city too, that it's not just top-down development that we should be talking about. So personally, I think this audience probably doesn't know who I am, so I'll give a brief presentation about my background. I'm a landscape architect from New York City, born and raised in New York. I've been practicing in New York for about 9 years until I left my position as a partner at W Architecture. I think effectively designed landscapes make cities cool. They make cities more livable places. Cities, as we all know in this room, will be centers of human habitation increasingly for the next millennia. More than 50% of humanity lives in city centers. By 2050, I believe 70%. Life expectancy rates are far higher, and innovation is prevalent in cities. This is why people come to improve their lives. But effectively designed landscapes make cities more livable. So we have to integrate urban ecology. I believe with what Ed Glazier says, that we're a destructive species, and if you love nature, you should stay away from it. You should live in the heart of a city. So how do we do this more effectively? We have to create resilient cities and more linkages. So back to this image, this is Manhattan, on the left before the Dutch arrived, and on the right, of course, present-day Manhattan, where I was born and where I worked. We can't live on the left. I don't think anyone in this room wants to live on the left, but we need the left in order to survive in the right. We need to integrate landscapes into cities. Particularly, we need to activate our waterfronts, and that's what my career has been about. This is New York City during Hurricane Sandy. Of course, resiliency around the time of Sandy became a global topic, and now we're focusing on resilient measures, particularly ecological measures, to protect cities from climate change. I personally believe in human-centered design, to focus around people, and people-centered design in public space. As a landscape architect, my most recent project before I left the firm was St. Patrick's Island in Calgary. This is a 12-hectare park in the center of Calgary as part of a major redevelopment project called the East Village, which provided about $350 million Canadian dollars of public investment combined with $900 million of private investment. That was the return for the city. This has been about a 6-year project, and this park was completed along with a 4-kilometer riverfront walkway, which is on the other side of the river. In August. The development is ongoing, and 99% of the parcels have been sold now. So landscape in Calgary and in our profession is the center of development projects. We start with the landscape, we start with the public space, and private development comes second. Just some images from that park. It's opening day. In 2012, I was invited to Prague on a Fulbright fellowship. I taught at the university. I went from an 80-hour-a-week position in New York at my firm to an 8-hour-per-week position at the university, so I had time on my hands. In order to fill that time, I started a nonprofit in Prague, thinking that it would last about 9 months till the end of my fellowship, and I could either close it or hand it off. The intention was to talk about involving citizens in the process and have a small conference. Well, 4 years later, we're a platform focused on the intersection of community, policy, investment, and design. We're design thinkers, and we think that leadership, particularly in the investment and political arena, needs to be educated. And we need to find leaders and educate those leaders to have a vision for sustainable cities, particularly focusing on the issues we care about, which is public space, waterfronts, and sustainable mobility. We're focused on education across all of those sectors, from the bottom to the top. And we really think that a transparent process, particularly in the region we're operating in Prague and Central Europe, a former post-communist bloc city, needs to have a more transparent process, needs to involve citizens in the city-making process. So Resite acts as a catalyst. We're a catalyst for social action and innovative leadership. We're an international platform. We're exchanging ideas about making cities more livable, more competitive, and more resilient. We're primarily interested in collaboration, above all, and alignment between the top and the bottom. We want the city, and we want everyone to believe that the city should be left in better shape for the next generation than it is for this one. A very simple concept, right? But very hard to implement, and very hard to make citizens, particularly in that part of the world, care so much about the future generation of their city. We're doing this primarily through two mechanisms. Public events. This is Enrique Peñalosa, the mayor of Bogota, talking with cultural leaders in a park in Prague, with pavilions and furnishing that students had built as part of our network. And we're doing it through conferences, and we're focused primarily on architecture, public architecture, urban design, and public space. We've been doing this for about 4 years now, so a startup initiative that we thought would last months is now 4 years old. We have about 5,000 followers, 2,300 delegates have come through our conferences, 250 plus experts from 35 countries, 12 public discussions, 9 workshops, 8 VIP events, 8 salons, 5 bike rides, 5 exhibitions, 4 festivals, 5 conferences, 4 film premieres, 2 pavilions, 2 international competitions, 1 hackathon, 1 street manual. And there's a slide missing. We just did a conference for UN Habitat in Prague. We were asked to organize a parallel event about private-public partnership to spur new forms of PPPs in Europe, particularly focused on the civic sector. This is a pavilion, our first pavilion that we installed, and we think that urban design needs to be communicated not just behind closed doors in conferences like this, but out in the public and public space. So conferences about public space in public space. This is a pavilion from Germany that we commissioned in our first year through a Kickstarter campaign. We also won some small grants. This is a grant from O2 Foundation with students. They built there's no furniture on the public space and in the waterfront particularly. That first film you saw was an example of that. So we put furniture there. And a perfect model of PPP was that this little stand on the top sells beer. Their sales went up 400% that weekend. We didn't get any profits. We're also doing workshops. So this is a furniture building workshop as part of that public space initiative, activating the city, activating the public space for children. We believe with Peñalosa that a city that's safe for children is safe for everybody. A pavilion, the second pavilion we did with students in a young architecture firm in Prague and Slovakia. This intervention is in one of Prague's main parks called Karlov náměstí, or Charles Square. We're not just working in the public realm, we're working with the highest level politicians and investors. This is a workshop we've done last year at the Bubny Rail Yards development, the largest brownfield development site in Prague, directly outside the city center, less than a 5-minute walk from the city center. And as Mr. Cookson said earlier, and others have said, we believe that we should start at the very bottom. So we're doing workshops for children. This is called the Kids Corner, and we build cities with kids. This year they'll be presenting at our main event. Our main event is a conference. We do a conference in June every year. This is June 2015 at Resite Conference, and it was called the Shared City, where we talked about the intersection of sharing economy and urban design. We try to attract the best speakers in the world to come to our events in order to raise the profile of this topic, because in Central Europe, the topic of urban design is quite new. So we're trying to get people to talk about this issue. This is Greg Lindsay from Fast Company, James Corner, the designer of the High Line Park in New York City, Benedetta Tagliabue, who's standing in front of her Boqueria market in Barcelona, Jan Nar, who was slated as the coolest mayor in the world from Reykjavik. And we're creating an environment that's not just about talking about urban design, but creating a network that people feel comfortable in, that people feel connected to. So we spend a lot of time on the curation of that environment. We sell books at our events from all of our speakers and our topics that we think are interesting relative to the conference theme. Just a quick numbers of our growth and our demographics. We went from a startup event of about 400 students, let's say 90% of those, startup event of about 400 students at our first event, and we're now about 800 people, and it's a mixed audience. Most are coming from Central Europe, but one of the reasons why I'm here is because we're trying to expand our audience. We think that this topic, particularly in Europe, and the speakers and the content we have is quite important for the rest of the world, because we always focus on a global topic, and we try to influence that topic with some local relevance. In terms of the attendance, we have about 800 people attending our events now, 800 to 1,000 in 2016. if we started at 90% students, that's now down to about 16 or 17%. So we've now managed to create partnerships with different municipalities. 23% of our audience is from the municipality, mayors, urban planners, urban designers. NGO and cultural sector, who we think is very important in creating the city, is 19 or 20%. Those students are coming in at like 16%, architects about 12 to 15, and developers between 10 and 15. This year it'll be more like 20. The demographics are interesting. About 51% of our audience is women. Look around the room. Most of the people here are men, probably. So at urban design events, an urban design platform that attracts women to their event, to their platform, is an interesting change in the demographics of urban design and urban planning. We're not exactly sure why this happens. We think that women, well, first of all, I think that women are smarter than us, so they're more projective. They're thinking about the future more than men are. Women are also caring, I think, about the environments in which they live, in which their children are playing in, because traditionally in Central Europe and in Europe too, we're still traditionally minded, conventional family structures with women taking care of their children. So they care about where they live and where they work. Safe streets, and green parks. This is a typical Reside event. It's mixed demographics, exactly the target that we want, from developers to investors, to politicians, community activists, and architects. So we're going across all sectors at all of our events. To do this in an environment where philanthropy is poor and sponsorships are low, we have 75 partners. So we have to engage every single partner at various levels to get these done. The political environment is also complex. In 2012, we had the support of then Mayor Sevboda. 9 months later, he was kicked out of office by a sort of city council coup. And in came the young deputy mayor who was in charge of planning, who had very innovative planning policies, who we formed a partnership with in that year. 2 years later, he was kicked out of office. And this is Mayor Karnasheva. She ran on a platform that was essentially opposed to all of Mayor Hudacek's developments, but then, of course, 6 months later, adopted most of them. So now we're now working with Mayor Karnasheva, the third mayor in 4 years. Actually, yesterday or today, they should be forming a new coalition, which was broken in November. So the political environment is very complex that we work within. In 2013, no one was talking about urban design except for us. Then the city formed IPR Praha, the Institute for Planning and Development, of which we are their main cultural and NGO partner. They're interested in the things that we're interested in, which is a prosperous city, permeable and accessible and interconnected city, open and cohesive city, functional and aesthetic city, vibrant cultural platform and creative city, and smart and transparent governance. These are all things coming directly from our language. The three basic things they've identified, which we're helping with, are the lack of experts dealing with this issue in Central Europe, a dialogue which we help create, and trust. Ladamhi Prahu is a cultural platform for NGOs. What we're doing in that platform is helping the city connect their ideas, their urban planning ideas, to the general public. And we're also giving them a platform to connect their ideas to the international community through our international events. We're also part of a Metropolitan Sounding Board, a new innovative platform that the city put together. It's about 60 experts from different disciplines to comment on the new Metropolitan Plan of Prague, which will be released in 2018 and presented for the first time at our conference in June. Again, they're dealing with things that we like. They put together an urban space and urban design manual for public space. This is the first time this publication was put out in Central Europe, and they've just published an English version. And I have to say, it's one of the best. It's one of the best I've seen on this topic, so it's worth taking a look at. They're also running international competitions and an open data platform online. So the environment has completely changed since we started Resite, which is great. So our future. I didn't leave my profession as a landscape architect to be a conference organizer. As the organizers in this room know, it's a thankless task. So we're starting to expand. Now this is a full-time position for me, and before it was not. It was a nights and weekends thing from New York. Now I'm living in Prague, and the 4 focus areas which we will start to work on, and which we're already working on, is research and advisory. We're starting to advise cities and investors, now in Prague and Warsaw particularly. We're also negotiating with a client in Abu Dhabi. So we'll be expanding beyond Central Europe. Online media, we're working with Vodafone to create a new platform for citizens to participate in the planning process, to create ideas for projects much like OpenIDEO, and also collaborate on those projects where we will find a private sponsor to build them. We're still doing events and competitions. We love doing them, even though they're thankless. And we're, again, trying to reach an international audience, both at our events and through our advisory network. This is the first time I'm presenting these slides. Just about 5 days ago, we won a major 5-year European Union grant. So we will be the lead curatorial partner for 15 different partners in design and culture. And we'll be leading a platform very similar to the one we're doing in Prague, but we're now going to be doing it across 6 cities, 6 countries, and 11 institutions. 4 conceptual pillars of that project are to create ideas yards, much like David Ajay's ideas yards concept in London, which is to create hubs of activity based around the ideas of urban design, the principles we care about in each of the cities that we're working in. We'll be presenting case studies of urban solutions in those cities. We'll be doing research about the process for those solutions, and particularly the process of involving community and civic action in creating the city. And curatorial labs, which is really at the heart of what we're doing, which is presenting architecture and urban design in a new way for a new kind of public. The process is kind of complex. I don't even understand this slide, but the idea in the small circle outside is that these are the core partners. This is the Goethe Institute, which is the German Cultural Foundation, the Czech Cultural Foundation, and Recite, the 3 core team partners, with 11 institutional partners in 6 different countries. And essentially, the idea is to spread these 4 platforms or pillars out to the general public. These are the exchange of those projects going through Prague, which is our hub, into the 6 different cities, plus Warsaw, plus London and Barcelona. And again, the particular exchanges happening between those partners. And our next event, I'll present a quick video.
Recite. Let's make our cities better places. To live, play, work, run a business, invest in our future, and play. Join the next event, Recite 2016, Cities in Migration, June 16th and 17th, Forum Karlin, Prague. Register at recite.cz.
That was my fault. I loaded the Czech video, but there's an English version online. The idea here is we're getting at the heart of the European crisis right now, which is the so-called migration crisis. As urban designers, as opportunists, we think that migration is a natural human phenomenon, one that can be solved with spatial planning solutions. And ultimately, it's a spatial planning problem. We're focusing now in Europe on the borders, and we really should be focusing on the cities. The Guardian just produced an article based on a Eurocities report that cities are lacking the tools and the resources to deal with incoming migrants, yet they're being held responsible to find solutions for them. So Cities in Migration will be the first major conference on design-related solutions and problems related to migration. And what does this mean for the design of public space, transportation, housing, and public architecture? How can leaders adapt policy and development plans to avoid the creation of isolated ghettos for residents? How have these challenges been met by other cities, other leaders at other times throughout history? Because again, this is a natural historical phenomenon. How have smart leaders attracted new residents to their cities? This is about magnetism, right? We want people to come to our cities, especially in Europe where cities are shrinking with native populations. And how can they be magnets for these diverse people? How can we use design thinking, inherently lacking in the conversations relative to migration, to strive for a diverse cultural and economic goal? The keynote speaker this year will be Saskia Sassen. Most people probably know Saskia in this room, talking about the global climatic impacts and also economic impacts of migration. She's been talking about this since the 90s. We're also talking about affordable housing solutions and different types of housing solutions. So Mimi Huang and architects will come from New York to talk about her Adapt New York City, which is a competition-winning design for micro units underneath Mayor Bloomberg. This is now completed. Kimmelman from the New York Times, Michael Kimmelman, the architecture critic, talking about the links between climate change and migration, something that's been rarely talked about. Riccardo Conti from London is going to be talking about architecture for different types of cultures and cities. And Ursula Strupa, the integration deputy mayor in Vienna, a city really at the forefront of this crisis outside of Germany. And finally, Carl Weisbrod, planning director for New York City, will talk about New York City's path towards sustainability and also the 200,000 units of affordable housing that New York will build in the next 10 years. An unbelievable number. So Saskia Sassen says the street is a space where new forms of the social and the political can be made, rather than a space for enacting ritualized routines. The city public space for me is a theater. Public spaces where interactions happen, innovation happens. As Richard Rogers said at the LSC Urban Age Conference a few years ago that I attended, we were talking about buildings, and he said, no one cares about buildings in cities. You know, we do in this room, but no one else does. People care about places to walk safely. They care about nice places to eat. They care about meeting their lover. And then they care about just going home. But the public space is where the city happens, where the interactions happen in the cities, and that's what we should be focused on. So we can't really agree more with that. And finally, in summary, cities need to be cool. We need vision and long-term commitment. We need bottom-up thinking mixed with top-down prerogatives and top-down leadership. And all of this leads to economic competitiveness. So we're talking about economic competitiveness through a design lens, which is often not utilized well enough. A lot of this philosophy of mine came from working as a landscape architect underneath Mayor Bloomberg for almost 10 years on some of the innovation in public spaces that he was creating, which, as many of us know, involved PPPs with the civic sector. So we're trying to start a new conversation, particularly in the post-2008 world. And thank you. I think I just made it.